Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. Today we continue on the discussion on remembering our wellness. Tribute to Mental Health Awareness Month. Remembering is a very human thing that we struggle with, and mental health is the same thing. And a lot of times sometimes it can be distressing for amongst family members and communities and it has been for years. There's a lot of cultural significance, and it can be overwhelming. The shame, the stigma can be very real for those communities. Today, we have a special guest, a new guest to the podcast. Her name is Ashley Grimes. She's a NAMI State Florida President. Thank you so much for joining us and continuing the conversation. This conversation is not always easy, but I feel it is needed. So thank you, Ashley.
Thank you for having me. And I think conversations change things. A lot of people, they shy away from talking about things, but sometimes talking about things lead to solutions or lead to understanding.
Yeah, and I feel that sometimes you're onto something when it's uncomfortable. Unfortunately, a lot of the most notable conversations are uncomfortable. I wanted to say thank you for just taking the time to share your insight with us today. Disclaimer for those in the U.S. I know they're changing it to 988 soon, but I'm just giving the full number. If you are in crisis situation, it's 1-800-273-8255. It's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. I encourage those listeners outside the U.S. to find what resources look different for everyone. I just want to, people say better than me, Ashley. They always do. There's always these great quotes, and I'm not shy to. David Spangler says this when we're talking about mental health, and he says, some people think that they're in a community, but they are only in proximity. True community requires commitment and openness. It is the willingness to extend yourself, to encounter, and to know the other. What comes to mind when you hear this quote?
It makes me think a lot of, there's been such a focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and I've taken several courses related to that. And it's for my whole life, there was just shame to try to fit into this box. And I didn't fit into the box of what I was supposed to be and what I felt like if I looked like or how I acted, I would be a good member of my community. But in reality, the more you learn about diversity, equity, inclusion, differences are strengths. And a community has to have members that are different or else they're weak. And that's why we adapt and we have adaptations, because changes and differences make us stronger. And so I think you're only close to each other if you're trying to be the same. Strong if you're the same. A community is a cohesive group that's strong together, and if you're going to be strong together, you have to accept the differences and love the differences.
I think that's wonderful, because a lot of times I learn more when I have disagreements with someone. I learn more about myself. I learn more about the subject. And sometimes, we have that awful look at the mirror of ourselves. We may have the passion or the drive to do something, but there's not always one way to do it. And there's people who have different, we talked about, I mentioned before, culturally. That's a huge thing. What your background is, and not just what your ethnicity or your race is. It's more how were you when you brought up? I'm a first generation American. My mom is South Korean, my dad is Puerto Rican. It is one of those things. So I just remember going to school, and traditionally Christmas was very different. People had, for me, I felt different. So I feel what you're saying is right on point, because a lot of times if we're all around like-minded people who think like us, doesn't challenge us or say why we doing what we're doing. It's just everyone saying yes, that's great. Yes, that's great. Doesn't really push the conversation forward, because I feel this is kind of a journey. It's not like a destination. It's something that we kind of journey through as time continues to change. Thank you. my wife has this one book. It's untranslatable words, and I'm gonna butcher this word. It's from Welsh. It says harath. It is a homesickness for somewhere you cannot return to, the nostalgia and grief for the lost places of your past, places that never were. I know, at least for me in recovery and several of my peers, we have a skewed view of what our life was before, and sometimes that could get us stuck. I like to mention this word a lot in my podcast because it's so unique. Like, it's such a long, weird, convoluted, vague definition, but I feel a lot of us can relate to it. I want to ask you this question, and I'm pulling it back to you. And it's Mental Health Month, but we can't talk about mental health without pain. When we talk about remembering pain, remembering loss, why do we want to remember, even remembering completed suicide? Why do we remember it? Why do we attach ourselves to this? A lot of times, sometimes that's why we don't have conversations. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I can only answer this for me personally.
Yeah.
And, I'm a person in long-term recovery. I'm also a person that struggles with co-occurring disorders, and a suicide survivor. And I found recovery after I lost my best friend due to suicide, death by suicide. And I used substances to numb. So when I first got into recovery, I felt everything very strongly.
Yeah.
And but her death was something that was so big and so hard. I still it was almost like that trauma, like I couldn't feel the full effects of what that loss felt like until, at the end of this month will be my 5 years. And it was 5 years in February since I lost her. And this year was probably the first year I felt it for the first time, like fully. And it was because I've done so much work and I allowed myself to not be numb. But in losing that numbness, it hurt. It hurt really bad, but it only hurt really bad because we had such great memories, because she was such a great person, because I had such great times with her. So if we don't remember the losses, don't remember the good either. Like, that's what life is about. It's good and it's bad. You can't have joy without pain. And
I a lot of times we try to, especially support groups, NAMI support groups. A lot of times we share stories. We check in, do our check in, and the one thing is, we may not understand exactly what the person's feeling, but we understand feelings of sadness or loss. This month is remembering our wellness. For me, is what you're saying. For me, the reason we remember these things is because of the people we love. We make mental health so complicated, but it is about the people. Like I said, I've been doing, I told you before, I'm doing EMDR therapy, and one of the first traumas I was working on, and I don't mind sharing just a little bit, was my friend was in a car accident when I was like in junior year, and I just remember the first thing you go, my image, they tell you to look at the image that you saw, and I remember just rushing from high school to go to the gas station, and I remember just seeing the car, I'm like, no one could survive that. And I remember feeling tremendously powerless at that point. And sometimes, we have these harass moments, because later on I had other times where then I just said, no, it's my fault that this happened. These things happen because, and then substances, I was a heavy drinker, I was in the military, so heavy drinking, it's, you numb it, you're like, desensitize the sensitivities, but trying to avoid that pain for so long provides more pain, at least from my experience. I can only speak for me, but I just remember that. So why do we remember? Because of course the people, but also the lessons we learned, the coping skills we learned, and how much we've grown so far. And I just really appreciate any guest that comes here. I don't some guests are like, yeah, I spoke at TED Talk. I don't care. We're here talking, really just sharing. I feel like these things are I just feel very, I would say, blessed to have people who want to continue to share it. And I'm just gonna ask you real quick, Ashley, could you share your take on, can you share, because people don't know you? I'll just ask you if you want to share a little bit about your story. I know that it wasn't really, but impromptu, just how the conversation go. Those who are listening, what makes you do what you do? Let me just ask you that.
Well, I kind of like alluded to it a little bit in the last question, but and I didn't really know until I got older and started looking back at stuff, but my stuff started young. I lost my dad when I was 11, suddenly, and he was like my hero, and then then you go to middle school as a middle school girl, and you don't ever feel like you fit in, and there was body issues and intense dieting and exercise, and it just and I don't want to call it daddy issues or anything like that, but you look to guys to fill a void that your dad left. And I had when I was 23, I had my first daughter, and I had my second daughter 16 months later. And when my youngest was 5 months old, I fell over a baby gate and shattered the radial head of my elbow. I can kind of see it. I can't really straighten still. I can bend, but it's that's 3 surgeries in a year and a half. Physical therapy, pain management. So I was sent to pain management and given everything under the sun for 8 years. And I'd gotten off of the pain medicine one time for 8 months. Ended up getting sepsis in my leg and went to the hospital and said no narcotics. Woke up and asked what was being put in my IV, and they were giving me morphine. I was sent home with 180 hydrocodone, and I was back to the races. And that whole time I was a mom. I was married. I was working in a church. I was running a 2-year-old program, and I was a store manager. And I couldn't get out of bed if I didn't take pain medicine. And it wasn't to get high. It was I could not function. I couldn't do anything without it. It was intense, withdrawals, and I didn't want to be there at all. And a lot of people, it doesn't matter what substance you use, but a lot of people go to this stigma of it was a choice, and it wasn't a choice. It was, I was told to take this medicine when I wasn't taking it enough, and intense pain and throwing up. They told me to take more, and I was following doctor's advice, and
And I feel that there's a lot of stigma, and I would like that you brought that up, because I feel, and I really, for me, it's easy to sit on the sidelines and say, well, you made that choice. Things don't happen in the vacuum. I work, the clients I work in the mental health field too, and I just know it's more complicated. It's about the individual, all the context, everything, the environment, everything leading up to this one choice. And you just hope, at least I just hope, that they have another choice that they can make later on. That's a sad truth. And for me, I think it's very brave that you're sharing all this. A lot of times we over-explain but the thing is, mental health is messy. Like, if we define it, it is messy. It is a struggle. And we talk about stigmatization, and it's culturally wide. Doesn't matter what race, gender, what you identify as. It doesn't really matter what church you belong to, how important you are. These things just cross lines. I'm a leader in church. I know how much I tell this to people when I say I know churches done sometimes have hurt people very badly. I do not sway away from that, but it's more about connecting with the individual. And I want to ask you, segue. I really appreciate you sharing what you did. I know it's hard. I want to also ask you, when we talk about stigmatizing in mental health, how do you feel community can approach this topic? Um, I think people. I would say this. I would rather people tell your story, your type of story. Struggling. I don't know what to do. I'm struggling with, pain medication, and then not be a bad, like, accountability is only a bad word when it's not a safe place. When you're saying I'm really struggling, and then they say you made that choice, where does it go there? Why can't we say, how can I help? What can I see? What can I do to? How can I be there for you? You get what I'm saying? So, well, how would you? Yeah, go ahead.
I can give you an example of this year. Remember when I said, this is the 5-year anniversary, and it was really, really hard for me. And like, I got really in my head because, like, with opiate use disorder, it's like once you get to 5 years, you have an 85% chance of sustaining long-term recovery. So you get in your head, you're like, okay, I just have to get like a couple, like, you almost psych yourself out. And like, so I'm struggling with this pain of like feeling this for the first time, and the guilt that I'm here and living this great life and she's not. And like, I 100%, like, I would not be here if it wasn't for her. Like, and I promised that I would make my life matter so that like, people could realize that their lives matter, so that we didn't have to lose more people like her. But when I was really, really close to, we'll use non-stigmatizing language and recurrence, because I didn't want to feel the pain. I wanted to numb so bad. But when I told, my people, like, I want to numb like that. I do not want to feel that. I do not want to feel this. They said, that sucks. And I know what it feels like to hurt like that and to not want to feel like that. And it's completely understandable that you feel the way you do. And it saved me from a recurrence, a relapse, whatever you want to call it, because somebody empathized that the way I felt was okay.
It's so funny you say it, because the thing is, the normalization of a feeling, because a lot of times, it's so shameful, and that's the problem. It's so shameful to have a problem. Then what happens when you need help? Well, you have to over-explain how shameful the problem is, and then deal with the problem itself. So when someone says, I can't, like, normalize and says, I understand, like, understanding that it's okay that you feel that way. One of the things we used to say is, it's okay to not be okay. It's so strange for people to say that, but it's so fundamentally healing to be, we have support groups. Why do people go? If you look on paper, some of those people's lives on paper don't change, but they do better. They feel better. Why? Because they're sharing stories. I'm from New Jersey, so there's a lot of Italians, right? I'll just say that. And there's one word that says, come viere. I'm messing it up. All the Italians are yelling at me. To be moved in a heartwarming way, usually relating to a story that moved you to tears. A lot of times, I know I was the first elder in the church. I understand doing Bible studies. One thing I always didn't like was when they said, well, you just have to follow the 10 Commandments and that's it. I'm like, you take out the story. Stories are the best elements to learn things. Your own story is your best element. Your story may help someone else with their journey. So I think stories in itself has been fundamentally a great tool to share experiences. And like in support groups, we do that. In NAMI, we do that. We have those avenues to family support group, the connection support group, that I feel is fundamental. It may be, some people may think, like, I don't need that. I remember when I got out of the military, I had nothing. I was struggling with my issues, and I was very bitter, actually. I was during 9/11. I felt like nothing. No one was there for me then. Why would I go to a support group with people? But it's been the best thing. It's been amazing. It's been great to just connect and just to be with people like that. So it's been it's funny what you initially is uncomfortable becomes something more.
Well, it's funny because the first time I was ever asked to speak, like, I'm not a person that likes to be in front of people. I get socially awkward and socially anxious, and it's just like, especially because I numbed for so long. So I was able to do it when I was numb, but when I'm like, then your insecurities, you feel them all. But the first place I was asked to speak was on Mother's Day at my mom's church. And I was like, the first time I'm going to tell my story in front of people is Mother's Day is a big deal at church.
Yeah.
And I'm like, as a mother, like going to speak and like having to tell that I watched 2-year-olds and I was high, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to go, I'm telling you, like, that was probably one of the moments that like changed my life, because I went in there and was completely honest, probably for the first time ever in church, and just was respectful, but I was completely honest and talked about how I tried to, fit in and didn't feel like I did, and, like had to dress a certain way to and it was like, there were so many other people that related to that and that were open to hearing my story and understanding it, that it was just like the empathy, and it was just like one of the most powerful moments ever. And so it was a place that I thought I would always be judged, and I wasn't. And that's huge.
That's wonderful, and that's the kind of community. This is a segue. Revive Ministry is not proselytizing; it is a ministry, but I treat it like a medical ministry. You can see medical missionaries in other countries. They bring medicine. What I like to do is bring a safe space so we could continue talking. That's it. It's the whole idea is a lot of these conversations unfortunately get pulled under the rug. I do like so much your story that that your church really rallied. You felt like it was a turning point, and I think this Coretta Scott King says it best. It says the greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members. It's not about there's so many people still trying to say how important they are, but really I found my healing from serving others. My recovery was just being there, serving, sharing, being there, it's showing up. Recovery, like you said, and what we said and hinted on, is not like every day I'm awesome sauce. Every day, some days I'm just I'm happy to get out of bed, and the success I have now is built on the remembering the coping skills, noticing when anniversaries of traumas are coming towards me, telling my wife of it, telling my supportive network, like, hey. And people say today, like, Rob, I don't even you had a mental illness, I don't see it, I don't see you, but that's years and years. And for me, I feel it's not that's why it's invisible, but it's also, I just love the idea of there's always that growth. There is always that, and it starts a lot of times from a community that you experience. There was moments in my life where I was afraid. I'm being brutally honest. I'm like, oh, this is gonna backfire, and it doesn't. And I think this is what this answers itself. But why is community involvement important in remembering our wellness? Because it kind of germinates. It produces moving forward. It's scary. It's scary being vulnerable. It's scary sharing these things when everything in your body is saying they're not going to look at me the same. We talk about value a lot, but we don't value it a lot in ourselves. So, if there's anything you want to add to this, Ashley, I think we've been talking back and forth, but I just want to ask, when it comes to community, anything you want to add?
Well, my dream, and it's been my dream probably since after my first year in recovery, is that a recovery ready community. That's, there's sober livings, and there's there's this, but recovery is not just from substances. It's not just from mental health diagnoses or disorders. It's not just from you can recover from anything.
Yeah.
Everybody is in recovery if they want to be 100% honest. As long as they're working on themselves, you're in recovery. And recovery is a process of change. Right? Try to regain your wellness or, return to wellness. If you go by like the definition, I paraphrase, but Sam says definition. And so like everybody is, if you're working on yourself, you're in a process. You might not be moving forward that day. You might be standing still. Sometimes you take a step to the left or a step to the right. But it's a process and a journey. And when we have communities that understand that and don't say you have to do it this way and it has to be a 12-step or it has to be a medication or it has to be church or it can't be church or it can't have communities that are ready for recovery, the world will change.
I think we're beginning, and the word holistic recovery, the idea that it's individualized. A lot of times when we talk about supportive resources, sometimes we make it too complicated. I talk to my clients or anything, I'm like, did you fish? Do you like fish? Like really, it's that simple sometimes. Obviously, there's other breathing, some more evidence-based things that have been helpful, especially through anxiety. But a lot of times it's just building what a lot of times when you're at least downsliding, you're on the onset of understanding that you have a mental illness or you're struggling with something. One of the first things you lose is things you used to like to do. You'll see the dusty guitar. You see things that you used to, and the more you look at it, more you're like, the days when I was. And sometimes, with mental health medications, at least people you may gain weight, you may feel your body may change, but when you put value in yourself, put boundaries. Boundaries is a huge thing when it comes to social and connectivity. You're reconnecting to the world now, not numbing yourself. So it's like, how do I do this effectively without overdoing it and allowing myself grace to just rest? So I think this is such a long topic, but I really appreciate what points we've already made. I want to ask you, we're talking about remembering wellness, our wellness when it comes to recovery. What would you like people to remember regarding Mental Health Month today, as we observe Mental Health Awareness Month?
I think I would like, especially this year, there's not a single person in this whole world that hasn't experienced trauma in the last 2 years. So whether it be, trauma with a big T, trauma with a little t, vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, like it doesn't matter what, what everybody is going through something. And I think that as we observe Mental Health Awareness Month, if everyone learned one coping skill that would help them or that would give them empathy to look at somebody else with a different lens, I think that we really could make a difference for anybody with a mental health diagnosis or a struggle. Or, the numbers are going to change. They're very undervalued right now. It's everybody is going to have struggled with something by the time the new numbers come out in the next few years. It might take a little bit for some of that trauma to hit, but it's going to affect think about 4 and 5 year olds that were afraid to go to the grocery store, afraid to see their grandparents. That does have its effects over the long term, and hopefully it won't be permanent. But when you give little kids a fear that they're going to give something that could potentially kill their grandparents, that's huge to put on a little kid.
And I feel you're a lot of people experience trauma, loss. One of my notable friends, he's on the podcast. He's a pastor. He lost his father on Christmas Day, about just over a year ago. And I just, for me, he was annoying with Christmas. He's like Elf. He's like, September, you gotta put Christmas stuff up. But one thing I do appreciate is the process. He went through the process of healing, still is, and it's one of the things that I feel I want people to remember also. Give yourself time, give yourself grace. Things, if it's a 2-year problem and you're expecting to be finished with it like 5 weeks ago, it's not going to happen that way. Invest in yourself. You're valued, and it's not because of the job or the title. It's not because of what you've done. I know this sounds weird, but I would say it's because you're Ashley. It's because I'm Robert. That's it. We make it so complicated. We have our own group of people. We make so many titles on top of titles, but really mental health is messy, but it's important because of the people. I feel that's any final thoughts you'd like to share with those listening today?
I think I would love to just say that, just like what Robert said, everyone is important, everyone has value, and self-care looks different for everyone. I hated the word self-care when I first heard it, because everybody was talking about going and getting their nails done or going and taking a bath, and I was like, how boring is that? Like, for me, self-care sometimes is reading a book or learning something new, or for some people, self-care is rock climbing. Self-care is doing something for you, and it doesn't matter what it looks like, as long as it's something that it's what you want to do for you. And
my self-care, I do karaoke a bit, I sing a bit, I also play video games. I don't mind. I was a gamer when I was young. Me and my brother just wanted to be busy, because then we have to do stuff. So I like video games, I like story elements, but for me, those are just little bits of me. Is it that everything? No, it's I do like I like connecting. I think everyone really does. It's just they connect in different ways. I want to say thank you, Ashley, so much for joining us in the discussion. It's been fun. This is really what I want. A lot of times, it's just to have these moments of clarity, moments of pause. Say, hey, mental health is something we need to remember. This is my experience of it. I know your experience is different and is just as valid. So. Revive, again, staying updated with Revive Ministries through ReviveMinistriesFL.com is our website. This is goodbye from Revive Ministries, leaving you with the last quote. It's from Oscar Wilde. Those who read books, the smallest act of kindness is worth more than the grandest intention. 1 second.